Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Good evening everyone and welcome along to the second round of the 2025 BRSCC Winter Series eSports competition, the second week of racing and our first appearance on home soil. We are at the Donington Park circuit for this second night of racing and a big grid of drivers, many of whom will be familiar names to those of you who regularly tune in to watch the BRSCC live streams throughout the seasons, and a couple maybe who will be new names to you, but certainly some exciting racing in prospect for you around one of the great circuits in the United Kingdom. The full Grand Prix circuit is our host venue, always a layout that produces lots of action and drama, both in the real world and in sim racing as well. And I know lots of the drivers have put in plenty of miles of testing after the season opener at Navarra a few weeks ago, and will be hoping to either continue their good form, if that was the sort of form they enjoyed last time out, or perhaps really kickstart their season in style in this second of 5 events this season. My name is not Scott Woodwiss. My name is Andy McEwen, standing in for Scott, who is off travelling the world commentating on real world racing, quite a long way away from home, I believe, over the most recent weeks. So he'll be back for the next round, but for now you are stuck with me, I'm afraid, for the 3 races here at Donington. But very, very much looking forward to my first BRSCC action of the year. I'll be back again throughout the course of 2025, covering lots of the live stream action for the real world racing for this club. But for tonight, it is 3 races around virtual Donington Park to keep me, and I'm sure all of you tuned in at home, entertained. We are deep into a 20-minute qualifying session at the moment, just less than 5 minutes to go, and it is Matt Kendall fastest at the moment in the Clapham North liveried car. If it's your first time tuning in to this series and you don't really know what's going on, well, all of the cars are the same. It's a one-make championship, the new BMW, which was introduced into iRacing, I think, fairly recently. The last major update in iRacing introduced this car. It's immediately become a real favourite. I turned a few laps in it the other week. It's a really challenging car, but a very rewarding car to drive when you get it right, and there are certain drivers who really seem to gel with it last time out at Navarra. Matt was one of them. He came out of Navarra not with a win, with 3 top 5 finishes, 2 podiums, actually 2 second place finishes at the start of that evening, and therefore is second in the championship, arriving here at Donington. The man who leads the points though is James Dennison. James Dennison in the Bromley Racing with Alba Studios car. You won't miss this livery, will you? The yellow and purple BMW, who was twice a winner last time at Navarra. arguably not quite as consistent, actually, as Matt Kendall, because those 2 wins were then followed by, I think it was a 6th place finish in race number 3 for James Dennison, and he's being pipped by Matt in qualifying this evening as well. So James not having things all his own way. He may have the early championship lead, but there is still a reasonably long way to go. It's only a 15-race championship, but obviously with only 3 races down, very early days in the championship picture. And James will certainly be hoping to defend that championship lead over the course of the 3 races this evening. Isaac Doble, meanwhile, is 3rd fastest. No, in fact, no, he's not. We've just had a change, haven't we? Jack Noller was 2nd. Dennison has now pipped him back to 2nd place again. Isaac Doble up there in 4th. Will Blackwell-Chambers, former Mazda MX-5 frontrunner, is 5th quickest, and current Mazda MX-5 frontrunner Tom Griffiths in 6th place at the moment. There we're seeing Isaac Doble in the 650 making his way through Redgate Corner and off down the Craner curves, and perhaps an opportunity to take a look at the sweeps, the twists and the turns, the elevation changes of Donington Park. They plunge down here through the famous Craner curves, onto the brakes, pitch the car into the old hairpin. Nice line over the apex curve there for Isaac Doble. Gotta be careful on corner exit there. Very easy to exceed track limits, pick up an off track. Too many of those and that can really ruin your race. You climb uphill through Starkey's and Schwant's curve and then pitch the car into the right-hander, uphill right-hander at McLean's 3rd gear, I think the gear of choice through there, using lots of curve on the inside to help rotate the car. Then comes Coppice, and Isaac doing what, be honest, I do almost every time I turn into that corner, missing the apex slightly. It's a blind approach to Coppice, and you've really got to commit to the apex long before you can actually see it. A poor exit from there will hurt you all the way down the exhibition straight. We now turn left instead of right into the Fogarty S's, because as I said, we're on the full Grand Prix layout, and again, a good exit from there is crucial, particularly in race conditions, because it leads into arguably the best overtaking opportunity on the circuit. The really tight right-hand hairpin at the Melbourne hairpin. Nicely done there for Isaac. Bit of wheel spin maybe on the exit, but accelerates now towards Goddard's. The final turn. This is a really tricky corner. It's off camber, over a crest, downhill on the exit. Again, relying on the curve on the inside to rotate the car, and he rotates it all the way into the pit lane, because Isaac Doble was actually on an in-lap, and with only 1 minute and 20 seconds left of the session, that will likely be his qualifying done with, so I don't think we'll see him back out on track. Tom Griffiths is still pushing on though, and Tom makes his way down in a queue of cars into the Fogarty S's. Slipstream will play a bit of a part around here, even in cars such as these ones, so being close to another driver is not a bad thing, but I think he picked up a slowdown penalty there through the chicane, so he abandons the lap. We turn our attention instead to Tom Merritt, Fiesta Junior star, who turns his way through the old hairpin. He's 7th quickest at the moment. Tom is doing his best to try and find, what does he need? Well, only about 100th of a second really to move ahead of fellow Tom Griffiths, and the youngster teenage racer. Of course, lots of these junior racers in real world racing are fairly experienced on the sim. That in fact is these days, I think, where the kids probably develop their love for motor racing, almost more so than turning up trackside and watching for real. It is all about sim racing for them these days, and it means that when they do then jump into a car for real for the first time, they're usually pretty much on the pace. Following here, Pete Smith, a little bit further down the order, was 17th, now 18th, because somebody improved just ahead of him. Not sure who that was, but Pete Smith is another one of those Bromley Racing BMWs doing his best to try and improve, but the 20 minutes, I believe, have elapsed, qualifying complete, and it's Matt Kendall who set the fastest time in the session, and Matt, second in the championship, will therefore line up on pole alongside James Dennison. Jack Noller, frontrunner in the Mazda MX-5 championship this year, starts 3rd alongside Isaac Doble. Will Blackwell-Chambers and Benji Douglas, I think, was a late improver into the top half dozen. Tom Griffiths and Tom Merritt, the two Toms together on row 4, ahead of series debutant Luke Pullen and Nathan Williams on row 5. Joe Moss and John Pethick will complete the top dozen on a busy grid of BMWs. 7th row for City Car Cup frontrunner Richard Jepp. He will have Chris Etheridge alongside Ben, Tom Monhomus and Ben Williams, with Ari Barker and Pete Smith next. Lee Britton a bit further down than you might expect in 19th alongside Mark Blunt, with Daniel Crisp and Jacob Woods on row number 11. 12th row for Richard Bliss and Lewis Turkington, a famous name in British motorsport, the Turkington name, the latest generation taking to the track with us this evening. Neil Chisnell and Keith Dalton are next ahead of Max Horler, Paul Dunningham, Jonathan Berry and Jamie Peter Ennis to complete the top 30. James Roberts and Carl Pilkington are next, ahead of Siobhan Beattie and Anthony Lindley. Dan Gamble and Bobby Holmes are on the next row of the grid, 35th and 36th respectively. So as I promised you, a big grid, 36 of them hopefully lining up for the start of this race, and an intriguing battle already in prospect really between Kendall and Dennison, the top two in the championship after that opening round. Third in the points, by the way, is Will Blackmore Chambers. Well, Will is only 5th on the grid, not a disaster for Will by any means, but he would have liked to have been a little bit closer to early season frontrunners James and Matt. Isaac Doble is 4th in the championship and 4th on the grid, so how's that for consistency? And Tom Merritt 5th in the championship. Well, he's all the way down in 8th on the grid, so he perhaps is a driver with a little bit of work to do. The grid, though, pretty much assembled for this first race of round 2 of the series. And who is going to get the best launch off the line? Rear-wheel drive cars, these, remember, they do run with a little bit of traction control to assist the drivers. That should help them launch off the line, which they do now. The red lights go out, and we're away racing at Donington Park. Pretty even start from the front row, men, you'd say. Could start by pulling in the background, look, trying to find a gap on the inside, and one, I'm afraid, is already pointing the wrong way before they even get to the start line. But it will be the pole sitter who hangs on to the early advantage through red gate. There's a collision just outside the top 10, I think, there. Hopefully, no, they didn't all get going. There are a couple of them pointing the wrong way further down the order. And there was the number 33 car. That was the car that was pointing the wrong way before the race even started. Siobhan Beattie. I think Pete Smith might have been one of those involved down at the old hairpin. James Roberts looks like he's lost some ground too. But at the head of the field, it is as you were. Kendall, Dennison, Noller, Doble and Blackmore Chambers, the top 5. Big lunge up the inside there from Will Blackmore Chambers to try and relieve Isaac Doble of 4th position. He's got the overlap, but not quite by the time they get to the top of the hill at Coppice. That was a brave lunge. Difficult place to make a pass, though, on the inside into McLean's. The momentum is often with the car on the outside, as indeed proved to be the case there. So Blackmore Chambers settles back into 5th position. 6th is Tom Merritt. 7th place for Benji Douglas, ahead of Pullen, Williams and Moss to complete the top 10. Somebody really breaks ranks there to try and get to the inside of Jacob Woods further back. That was Richard Bliss, I think, trying to make a move. We ride on board with Luke Pullen, who missed the opening round of the season at Navara. He's missed his breaking point into the Melbourne hairpin as well, although I wonder whether maybe he picked up a slowdown penalty from cutting the chicane. That is a tried and tested method, that, of getting rid of a slowdown penalty. By just going really, really wide at Melbourne, you sort of lose the time without, in theory, losing too much track position. A few places lost by Luke Pullen, but he is already trying to do something about that. Pulls up alongside Joe Moss. He's got Tom Griffiths behind him, so Tom Griffiths has lost a lot of ground from where he started the race, inside the top half dozen, if memory serves. So already the order, certainly from 5th on back, not really resembling the order they lined up on the grid. But some good racing in prospect amongst that lead group, I suspect, where we've really got a leading group of 3, Kendall, Dennison and Noller, then a gap back to Doble. Tom Merritt has just gone 5th. Now that means he's ahead of Will Blackmore Chambers, so Tom Merritt then up into the top 5. And yes, Will Blackmore Chambers has lost touch rather with this leading pack, hasn't he? So Will, who at this point on the opening lap was on the attack, well, still on the attack, but he's a position further back than he was. He is the Clapham North livery car in that group, with Nathan Williams not far behind. Lots of dirt and gravel being strewn across the road. Luke Pullen's going around the outside. I seem to recall saying that once or twice before. He is actually trying to defend, though, from Tom Griffiths, who is a former frontrunner and race winner indeed in the BMW Compact Cup, so familiar with this particular brand of German machinery. And in his mirrors now, he sees a battle between another MX-5 driver, John Pethick, and on Hemius as well. And another car also in that group actually is Ben Williams. Ben Williams, I'm pretty sure, is the MG Metro Cup Ben Williams, who I have done a bit of MX-5 racing with on iRacing in the past, so I know he's a pretty handy peddler on the sim. There is Ben Williams, and the number 75 driver trying to take advantage of the side-by-side battle that was sort of breaking out in front of him, but things just settling down slightly. Daniel Crisp there going for the outside line on the way into Goddard's to try and get the better exit and maybe find a way past Ford Fiesta racer Mark Blunt, but not quite able to do that for the time being. We settle back in line on board briefly there with Daniel Crisp as we now move into the middle portion of what is a short race. Only 15-minute races these, so not a lot of time really to establish yourself or indeed to make progress if you need to. Following here, Ari Barker, and Ben Williams is the driver just ahead. Both of them sliding their way through the old hairpin. Bit of damage to the front of Barker's car, so a bit of contact maybe for Ari a little bit earlier in the race. Don't think that's quite enough to massively affect the performance of that car, the number 66 machine, but obviously a little bit of touchy-feely stuff earlier in the race. Back to the leaders though, Matt Kendall and James Dennison. Dennison the points leader, remember, but comes into tonight only 1 point clear of Matt Kendall, so essentially whoever comes out on top in this race will take the championship lead. I believe they will be having some drop scores to come into the equation a bit later on, but not really worrying about that too. The championship, Dennison then rolling through the centre of the Melbourne hairpin, a little bit better than Matt Kendall, but then you see he had more speed through the apex, but Kendall had the better exits because he was a bit more patient, knew that Dennison wasn't going to be able to drive through his car, just parked it on the apex and rocketed off the corner, still with the race lead. The fastest lap though belongs to Dennison, so James Dennison was a little bit quicker on the previous lap. I believe they do bonus points for fastest laps, so Dennison at the moment will be scoring 99 points, 100 points for Kendall, so not a huge swing. In fact, that would leave them tied, wouldn't it, based on how the standings look so far. Luke Pullen going into 9th position there, and then going back down to 10th place again, because he was briefly up the inside of Joe Moss, but couldn't quite get the number 27 car stopped at Redgate Corner. This has been a good battle, though, for a number of laps between this group. Tom Griffiths and John Pethick are not far behind. Pullen perhaps struggling a little bit because he did miss that opening week, but sure, like many, has been putting the practice mileage in between rounds to make sure he's as competitive as possible. Another position lost, meanwhile, for Will Blackwell-Chambers, so this is all a little bit odd for Will, who qualified towards the pointy end, is now down to 7th position. That was Nathan Williams going through, so Nathan in the 550 car, having gained the place, then has a huge power slide coming out of Coppice. Rear of the car just breaking loose, and that gives Will Blackwell-Chambers maybe the opportunity to have a little look into the Fogarty S's. You don't really do a lot of overtaking into the S's, but by showing his nose he's hoping to distract Nathan Williams. He maybe did, because Nathan was a bit wide on the way in, a bit slow on the way out. Blackwell-Chambers sees a gap to the inside, late on the brakes, commits to the move. Does he get the number 43 car stop? Yes, he does. So Will Blackwell-Chambers back into 6th position, and that was a really well thought out move. He sort of forced the tiniest of errors out of Nathan, and from there was able to complete the pass. Nearly throws it all away at Goddard's though, by not exactly making friends with the apex, but the wide line through the corner gives him plenty of traction on the exit, and he will now look to try and get his head down and pull away. We're not quite halfway through this race yet, so he's got time to try and close back in on Tom Merritt in 5th. Luke Pullen is again up the inside into Redgate Corner, this time though on John Pethick. Now, he was a couple of places ahead of John the last time we checked in, so something has happened to young Mr. Pullen. Not sure what, but he's lost a few positions, whatever it was, doing his best now to try and get that back. Luke, who was one of 3 drivers who went into the final round of the Mazda MX-5 Championship with a chance of the title last year, ended up coming out of that final weekend in 3rd. This is how he lost some ground. So he's going to the outside into the Melbourne hairpin. Tom Griffiths is the car behind, and Luke, well, rather invents his own line through the Melbourne hairpin. Not the fastest you've been through that corner, Luke, I would say, and loses a couple of positions as a result, but already back ahead of Pethick, and looking to try and chase back down Tom Griffiths, who these days is finally, some would say, a race winner in the Mazda MX-5 Super Cup Championship. Took him a while to get to the top step, but finally got there in 2024. Side-by-side battling going on there just up the road. We're following Pete Smith, who has got Carl Pilkington behind him, and there's been a collision. 2 cars were around. One was a Jep, I think Richard Jep, and I'm not sure who the other one was. There's another car now. Jacob Woods across the grass at the chicane. There is the recovering Neil Chisnell, who definitely gets high marks for his retro touring car livery. Richard Jep was the one who tangled with him. They were, I think, the 2 that I saw going side by side into Coppice, and then they were the 2 pointing the wrong way on the way out of Coppice. So, yes, my detective skills, limited as they are, I think can probably piece together what happened there. 2 into 1 at Coppice Corner, not quite going, maybe. Let's see then. So here they were, side by side out of McLean's. There is a slower car just in front of them, which didn't get a great exit. That sort of bottles them up, and then, yeah, maybe a bit of netcode involved as well, in fairness. A bit of a clumsy collision there. They both might have saved it, had it not been for the secondary bit of contact But of course, at that point, neither of them were really fully in control of their vehicles. So, place is lost, but still time in the race, 6 minutes or so for them to try and regain some lost ground. There's another one off now, as that's Paul Dunningham. Oh no, Anthony Lindley disconnecting actually, or heading back to the pit lane, possibly with some damage. So a few of them falling by the wayside here. Although there has been, I would say, a little bit less contact than we'd had by this point at Navarra last time. So they're learning as they sort of shake off the winter cobwebs, which is very much a big part of the idea, really, of this winter series. Oh, why did I say that? Daniel Crisp, the latest to find himself in the gravel trap. Interesting livery on the 97 car. I'm not sure whether there's a meaning behind the sort of octopus paint that's been applied to that car. I think he's tangled with another sea creature there. Was it Max Horner that he tangled with? I'm sure he had a squid or something on the side of his car, which is it was meant to be, wasn't it, that those two were tangled? Is that a squid? I'm not an expert on marine wildlife, I'm afraid, but oh, a lobster. There we go. The clue was on the bonnet. The Loco Lobster of car number 11, Max Horner, 19th position, but I do believe he was involved slightly in that little tangle up at the top end of the circuit, which has been the trouble spot in this race, hasn't it? McLean's and Coppice in particular said during qualifying how tricky Coppice Corner can be. That's when you're on your own, let alone side by side with somebody. And yeah, easy to end up getting tangled up at that part of the track. No such worries for the leaders, though. Still Kendall Dennison and Jack Noller. We haven't really mentioned Jack Noller a lot in this race, so we'll give him a little bit of love, shall we? Lukey P's eSports Team of Dreams and Wonder. It's the team name Jack Noller is running under. I wonder whether the Lukey P is his championship rival from last year, Luke Pullen, in the Astro X5 Mark 1 series. Kendall and Dennison, meanwhile, are absolutely tied together. They really haven't been. I've been keeping an eye on the timing stream. They've never been more than half a second apart, these two. But as close as Dennison is, as much pressure as he can apply to Matt Kendall, no mistake so far has come from the race leader. Dennison really sent it into the Fogarty S's. But again, all that speed on the way in, nowhere to go with it through the change of direction. So on the exit, Kendall has the advantage and doesn't feel the need then to defend down into the Melbourne hairpin. Again, you can see there Dennison rolling in, maybe tapping a bit of Morse code onto the back of the Matt Kendall machine. But Matt just isn't being shaken by this, not being distracted, not being forced into a mistake, and not relinquishing the race lead just yet anyway, to someone who he no doubt sees as a real threat for the championship. These two have been the form men so far, although interestingly it was Will Blackwell Chambers who won the third race at Navarra, so Dennison won the first two from Kendall, so the reverse of the positions they're in now, and then this man, Will Blackwell Chambers, was victorious in the third race, but that's the race I believe that features a partially reversed grid, so maybe that helped him, although he'd been in the top five in the previous two races. In fact, a third and a fifth, I think, for Will Blackwell Chambers in races 1 and 2. So he was maybe a little bit more competitive than he's been so far this evening. Tom Griffiths, meanwhile, side-by-side with John Pethick through the Crater curves, and that was brilliant, clean side-by-side racing. This is all over 11th position. I think Luke Pullen has recently got ahead of Tom Griffiths back into the top 10. So Tom, in the TJ Motorsport BMW, is now out of the top 10. There is Pullen, and can he maybe have a little go at Joe Moss here in the Flat Cap Motorsport car? I think he might be a little bit quicker at this stage of the race, closing the gap slightly on the 23 machine. There is Joe, who accelerates out of Coppice Corner. We've got what, just under 2.5 minutes to go, so touch and go as to how many more laps we'll get in here. Actually might be time for 2 more after this one, because of course once the time elapses you finish the lap that you are on, so may well still have a fair bit to play out in this first race of the evening. John Pethick certainly hopes so. He wants to try and find a way back ahead of Tom Griffiths. There, meanwhile, is Tom Onhemius in the dark green machine, number 98, and he has got a real gaggle behind him. Ben Williams, Harry Barker, Mark Blunt, Chris Etheridge isn't far back either. In fact, no, he's a few seconds back, isn't he, in the early 90s Vickley Racing liveried car. There's Harry Barker still sporting that little bit of damage to the front of the number 66 car. But as I suspected, hasn't really slowed them down too much. Now, Keith Dalton is in a bit of a world of trouble here. He's trying to find a way ahead of, who was that? Pete Smith? No, not Pete Smith that he's battling with. It is Dalton, Holmes and Richard Bliss, this group, isn't it? Richard Bliss, of course, recovering from that earlier spin and gets squeezed out a little bit going into the final turn at Goddard's, then has a little nibble at the back of the Bobby Holmes car. Thankfully, no one ends up pointing the wrong way around though, so the battle can continue, as can this one for the race lead. We have got a minute to go. It's going to be really close as to whether they get round to the end of this lap in time for one more. I think they just about will, so this is not over yet. Matt Kendall better not be writing that winner's speech just yet, because James Dennison is going to throw everything at this. He's dropped Jack Noller a bit now, so doesn't really need to worry about defending from the third place man. Of course, if these two do start going side by side, though, that will invite Jack Noller right back into the party. So James has to be careful about this. If he goes for a move, he really wants to make sure that it works first time. Doesn't want to be stuck in a side-by-side exchange with Kendall, but so far the opportunity just hasn't presented itself. Kendall a little bit wide there at the Melbourne hairpin, though. It's the first sort of hint of a mistake we've seen, but it didn't really cost him, because by the time they reach Goddard's, he's pulled a car length again over Dennison, who is stuck with a faceful of Matt Kendall's BMW as they accelerate out of the final corner. They will just cross the line with time for one more lap to go. About 6 seconds were left, I think, when they came through. So this will be the final lap of race one of the evening, and it's Matt Kendall versus James Dennison, as was the case in the first two races at Navarra last time out. Another battle for the victory between these two. And the winner of this race potentially could have the championship lead by the end of this final lap. They drop down through the Crater curves. The old hairpin isn't really an overtaking opportunity in these cars. It's all about getting a good exit, climbing the hill, using the slipstream, and maybe building to a challenge into McLean's corner. James Dennison's had a good exit from the old hairpin, but which way will he go? Is there a gap on the inside? Well, sort of, but he chose not to go for it, almost pushing Matt Kendall through the right-hander at McLean's. And that just lost James that little bit of momentum that he was building, and he's got to start from scratch again. Pitches the car into the right-hander at Coppice, and still no way through. Realistically, two more opportunities to go. The chicane isn't really a passing opportunity, but he may show his nose just to try and force the mistake out of the race leader, which he does. But there's no mistake, I don't think, on the way in for Kendall. What about the exit speed? Pretty even. No, much better actually for the leader. I think Dennison had a snap of oversteer just as he bounced on the curb, and that means that Kendall again doesn't need to cover the inside line into the Melbourne hairpin. Oh, definitely a love tap given to the leader that time, but not enough to unsettle Matt Kendall's car. And Matt is now just one corner away from getting his first victory of the season. He came up just short in the first two races last time at Navarra, but finally in the fourth race of the season, Matt Kendall will come off the final corner. He will be the first driver to see the checkered flag, and Matt Kendall wins the first race of the evening here at Donington Park. James Dennison second, and Jack Noller did close in slightly on the final lap, but has to settle for the third step of the podium. Side by side further back, meanwhile, that was Isaac Doble and Nathan Williams, was it? Yes, it was. Less than a tenth of a second apart at the line in their battle for sixth position. Harry Barker there we saw coming through. I don't think we saw any changes in this group at the end. We may well have some changes here. Oh dear, Jonathan Berry, well, that was a 2 for 1, and he gets instant karma, and he is the one who ends up pointing the wrong way as well. Lewis Turkington was one who he assaulted. I didn't quite spot who the first car was, possibly Max Horler in one of the Loco Lobster cars, but that was a little bit of a clumsy run through the final turn. Daniel Crisp ends up in 19th place after his various dramas. Neil Chisnell here, he was off earlier on. He will come through in 31st position. Looks like Lee Britton and Carl Pilkington possibly were the only two non-finishers. No, Anthony Lindley and Dan Gamble as well were not running at the flag. We saw Lindley pull off at Redgate Corner, and we also lost a couple of others from what was a bruising but entertaining first race of the evening at Donington Park. And that was a fantastically managed victory, you've got to say, from Matt Kendall. So, a brief chance to breathe before we move into race two. The starting lineup for this one based upon the result of race one. So Kendall, Dennison, Noller, Merritt, Blackmore Chambers and Isaac Doble, the top 6, ahead of Nathan Williams and Benji Douglas. Joe Moss and Luke Pullen complete the top 10. Then Tom Griffiths and John Pethick on row number 6. 7th row, Tom Monhemius and Ben Williams. Harry Barker and Mark Blunt are next, ahead of Chris Etheridge and Jacob Woods. Daniel Crisp and Max Haller to complete the top 20. Then Pete Smith and Keith Dalton, Richard Jepp and Richard Bliss, 2 City Car Cup drivers lining up together on the 12th row. Jonathan Berry and Bobby Holmes are next ahead of Paul Dunningham and Siobhan Beattie. James Roberts and Jamie Peters-Ennis complete the top 30. And then we had Neil Chisnell and Lewis Turkington, Carl Pilkington, Lee Britton, Anthony Lindley and Dan Gamble. The 4 retirees from race 1 will all bring up the rear and be keen to try and move forward from there. Already the red lights are on. Oh, someone's gone far too early further down the order. We'll figure out who that was in a moment. For now, though, all eyes on the front of the field, where there is absolutely going to be no way that James Dennison will want to allow Matt Kendall to lead through turn 1 again. He's trying the inside line, but I don't think he quite got the overlap, did he? We are a few cars further back. No, it is still going to be Kendall with the advantage then. So the same top 3 as we had at the end of the previous race, Kendall, Dennison and Noller. And then all of the battles breaking loose behind. Looks like a good start this time from Will Blackwell Chambers, back into 5th position, ahead of Isaac Doble. Out to the old hairpin we go, and Dennison a little bit wide there. Now, does that leave him vulnerable to attack? Possibly. There are cars off in the background, but hopefully they'll all be able to rejoin the circuit. The leaders arrive at McLean's, and yes, Dennison just hanging on to 2nd, but that might be a change for 3rd. That is Tom Merritt going around the outside of Jack Noller. Someone was in the gravel, 2 cars in fact off in the background. Again though, we'll focus on that in a moment, because the battling at the front of the field, well, I thought was going to lead to a slightly jumbled up order, but they've all sort of ended up where they were, haven't they? In fact, Will Blackwell Chambers has stuck into 4th position ahead of Tom Merritt, and Tom only now settles back in line in 5th position, so he was trying something on the outside up there at McLean's. It almost worked, but not quite in the end. So Kendall leads then. Oh, look, Pullen being given a big squeeze into the Melbourne hairpin. Does he get the car stopped? Yeah, well, he does, but the 23 car to his outside of Joe Moss runs very, very wide and sort of forced Benji Douglas wide with him. So 2 places gained by Pullen, who was on his toes there to move up the order, try and make up for a few issues that he had in race number 1. Out through the final turn we go then. Kendall, Dennison, Noller, Blackwell Chambers and Doble the top 5. 6th places side by side. That's Nathan Williams and Luke Pullen, is it? No, Luke Pullen's behind, sorry. It's Nathan Williams and Tom Merritt, excuse me. So Merritt, number 12 car, who was battling for 3rd half a lap ago, is now struggling. There's a slowdown penalty, it would seem, for Nathan Williams. Oh, he's collided with another car, and that was Joe Moss. As he was serving the slowdown penalty, he's had clumsy side-by-side contact with Moss, who may have picked up some damage from that, so that was unfortunate for Joe. He thought he was about to pick up a freebie there, but ended up actually losing places, and I wonder whether that's done some damage to the back of the car. It seemed to be sliding awkwardly down the hill. Now, though, seems to be picking up the pace again, so Joe Moss then settles into 14th position, but that's really disappointing for Joe. He was running a lot better than that earlier on. There's more chaos now at McLean's corner as John Pethick and Tom Griffiths, not for the first time this evening, find themselves side by side. Pethick goes through on the way into Coppice corner. Tom Griffiths goes for the switchback. Rear end of Tom Griffith's car just didn't look very settled there, did it? But he's up alongside. This is the outside line, though, into the Fogarty S's. Not the part of the track I would want to be on, but Tom fully commits to the move and sweeps around the outside of Pethick. That leaves Tom vulnerable now John vulnerable to attack from Tom Monhemius. Forces John Pethick to defend the inside line, and I think will successfully defend that position for the time being. So a breathless opening couple of laps then, and although the order at the front is pretty static from race 1, it's all change behind, isn't it, really? Pulling up to 7th. We're going to see a replay here of... This was Joe Moss. So look ahead, look, there is Nathan serving this slowdown penalty. And is that net code? It's hard to tell from that distance. I think it might have been maybe. That's definitely done some damage to both cars, but Joe thankfully able to continue after another little grassy moment during his recovery. But that was unfortunate. Possibly some net code there, I think, that led to that. Another replay, meanwhile, of what happened here to Max Haller at the final corner. That's Monhemius on his outside, I think, the green and white number 98 car. And just heads into the pit lane. That's interesting. Was that the car that jumped the start, maybe? There was a car that jumped the start. It looked like it might have been that machine that I saw jumping. And that would make sense, wouldn't it? Black flag for him. Right, further back, Lee Britton. Now, Lee Britton started this race down in the low 30s, I seem to remember, the red machine. He is now up into 19th place. So, Lee Britton, who, it's fair to say, does a bit of sim racing himself. He runs a company that sells sim racing gear. In fact, sold me my pedals not that long ago, diddly, and he is definitely a handy sim racer. 31st or wherever he was in race 1, he's not where he should have been, but he could not find Bobby Holmes, who just sent it up the inside of Chris Etheridge and gained a place. I don't know whether Bobby meant to do that or whether he missed his braking zone, but Bobby in that sort of Barney the Dinosaur car, he's definitely missed his braking zone there, clatters into the side of Ben Williams. But watch this, Bobby was under threat, big threat here from Lee Britton. Look how far ahead Chris Etheridge is. Oh, definitely missed his braking zone, but gets the car stopped and didn't pick up a slowdown. But then they got down to the Melbourne hairpin and he went for another banzai move that did not end quite as cleanly. He's got the place though. Look, we rejoin him live and he is now up ahead of Williams. Chris Etheridge is back up the inside of Williams as well, and Lee Britton fancies a bit of that too. Nips to the inside of the yellow 75 machine, which finds itself elbowed out wide. There's a car recovering on the outside of the corner. But this is fantastic racing. Bobby Holmes having carved his way through this group, using some pretty inventive overtaking skills, but he's got it all wrong at the old hairpin, got 2 wheels on the grass down the hill, and finally a mistake came from Bobby Holmes for which he was punished. That was, again, lucky not to spin really for Bobby, but loses all of the places that he gained so excitingly on the previous lap, and drops back out of the top 20, I reckon. Well, into 20th place, actually. Right, let's take a look at this again. Chris Etheridge is applying the pressure. This is the Etheridge eye view. Oh, and Bobby missed that curb. You really want to ride that curb on the left-hand side through the crane of curves. It turns the car, hooks it round to the left, and means that you don't then run the risk of running onto the grass as he did. But because he missed that curb, it just understeered wide, and unfortunately, the gravel trap beckoned, but could be worse. No damage picked up, and there he runs, look, still in 20th position, although that looked very much like he may have picked a slow down penalty up through the Fogarty S's. Now, you're not seeing double. This is his teammate, Jamie Peters-Ennis. Now, Jamie and I go back a fair way, working on the Fun Cup Endurance Championship for probably getting on for a decade now. Jamie, the pit lane reporter for that championship, and oops, he is getting himself involved. Oh, it's all gone wrong. And Jamie Peters-Ennis, I'm afraid, was almost heading back to his spiritual home there. That's the rear entrance to the pit lane that he was heading towards. And Jamie, with a little bit of assistance, it must be said, found himself destined for the barrier. This is what happens. So who was that he was battling with? Didn't quite catch the number of the car to his outside, but anyway, they break down into the Melbourne hairpin. Jamie gets a bit of a bump from behind, and then does he close the door? Little bit. Is that 22, I think, maybe? That he had the collision with Pilkington. Sorry, it was Pilkington, I'm being informed, thank you. So it was Carl Pilkington with whom he tangled, and now Jamie is back in more familiar surroundings in the Donington Park pit lane. Right, moving on. Nathan Williams scrapping away with Tom Griffiths. This is for 8th position now. So Tom, I forget whether he made the top 10 in race 1. I think he just scraped into it, didn't he, after some good early battles. Well, he's involved in another scrap now as they drop down into the Fogarty S's. Tom again concedes the position on the way in, hoping no doubt to get a better exit for the corner, but he's got to be mindful of John Pethick behind. John is not that far adrift of the number 76 car, which sort of makes a late defensive move to the early apex. Monhemius in behind as well, and they're only about half a second ahead of Benji Douglas too. Benji is the red and white car at the back of this group, so a good little scrap going on. As Neil Chisnell gains a position up the inside of the number 5 car, I think that was, sorry, number 9, excuse me, James Roberts. James, one of the photographers who regularly works with the BRSCC in the real world. I didn't actually know James was a sim racer until I saw him signing up for this event, so good to see him getting to actually relax and enjoy motor racing as a hobby for once, not a job. That's some contact, that's some more contact, that is Bobby Holmes, and that's contact with the 72 car this time, and the 72 machine finally finishing off Bobby Holmes, I think there, whose car is hidden from view behind the pit lane entry wall. But that was all a little bit unnecessary. Bobby now peels into... He's going to do a 3-point turn to head down the pit lane, though, I suspect. I would imagine that car will require the attention of his virtual pit crew. Here is the replay. So he loses a place going into the number 65 machine. That was Richard Jepp, and then just gets tangled up with another car. Then Mark Blunt arrives on the scene. The 72 car was the other one that got involved, and Bobby ends up with a big hit into the end of the pit wall. Lewis Turkington, that was, actually. who ironically ended up getting turned around at that corner on the final lap in the previous race. Bobby looks as though he's just done a sort of self-induced drive-through penalty, almost just drove through the pit lane, rejoined the circuit, and will continue on his way. Right, we do still have a battle for the win, let's not forget that. We are ticking our way through this race now. We've got just over 5 minutes to go. And, well, it's a familiar sight, isn't it, really? Matt Kendall, James Dennison, the same order as it was at the front of the field in race 1, and a really similar situation with Jack Noller as well, who stuck with them in the early stages, but doesn't quite seem to have the consistency over a race run to go with them. The difference for Jack in this race, though, is that Will Blackwell Chambers has very much found his mojo again, and is right on the tail of Noller, who, as if to try and prove me wrong, though, has actually set the fastest lap in this race, 1:38.268. You can see that highlighted purple on the timing tower to the left of screen. So Jack Noller has been going very quickly earlier on in the race, but that lap was set a few laps ago, I think, before Will Blackwell Chambers properly started to apply the pressure. Behind them, by the way, there's a three-way fight for 5th developing between Isaac Doble, Tom Merritt and Luke Pullen. So seemed much better from Luke in this race. There he is, look, the black and whitey car at the back of the trio. But Tom Merritt, I think, is the one who's really on the attack. He's closing in on Isaac Doble, who I believe is the younger brother of both Joe and Mikey Doble, who of course have had so much success, not only with the BRSCC in Mikey's case, but in particular in BMW Compact Cup racing, those two, and Isaac Doble now perhaps starting to arrive on the scene as well. Douglas is battling with Joe Moss. Monhemius, excuse me, this is battling with Joe Moss. And as they turn their way through the left-right chicane, I'll get this right in a moment, it's Monhemius battling with Douglas. Moss is several seconds behind them. So Monhemius in 11th, Douglas there, number 70 in 12th. And another one of the Sim 1 liveried cars, so running in conjunction with Lee Britton, who... where is Lee now after his various escapades in this race? 14th place now for Lee Britton from, I'm sure it was 31st or 32nd on the grid. Really impressive drive this from Lee, who again finally managed to get onto the top step of the podium in the Mazda MX-5 Super Cup Championship recently. And Lee Britton, a really, really talented driver. Can he get any further in this race? Probably not, in fairness. He's about 4.5 seconds behind that group we were just following. But Lee Britton doing a really, really good job carving his way through the order and positioning himself well, maybe, to battle for a top 10 in race 3. Now, I believe, and I stand to be corrected here if I'm wrong, but I believe race 3's grid is a top 10 reversal of the order for race 2. So he would be just out of that. If that is the case, Nathan Williams at the moment would pick up pole position from John Pethick and Tom Griffiths, but they are the 3 drivers in shot there battling for 8th positions. That could all change in the final couple of laps, especially if Tom Griffiths continues to slide the number 60 car around like that. So used to him running as number 76 in the real world. I presume that number was taken by someone else. So number 60 for Tom in this championship. Scott Woodwis, watching from wherever he is in the Middle East, I believe, is able to correct me on that top 10 grid reversal. So yes, this is a battle for 8th place, but it will also determine the order at the front of the grid for race 3. Just up the road, meanwhile, Isaac Doble and Tom Merritt doing battle, and Luke Pullen itching to get involved as well. That's Isaac Doble, the all-white car, defending 5th position from Tom Merritt. And defending again into Goddard, so Luke Pullen thinks, hang on, there could be an opportunity here, takes a wide line into Goddard. Now watch for the overspeed on the exit, can he time it right? Oh, didn't quite get the traction, did he, on corner exit, so Luke Pullen has to settle in behind. Not all bad for Luke, though. He's got a grandstand view of this battle as it races towards Redgate Corner again. This, remember, is over a position in the top 5, so well worth going for here. Isaac Doble, who picked up 2 top 5 finishes, including a 2nd place in the reverse grid race last time out. Tom Merritt also was consistently in the front, had a 3rd and a 5th place in the first 2 races. Other way round, actually, 5th in race 1, 3rd in race 2, and then struggled a bit more in the reverse grid. So these are 2 regular runners inside the top 5. Pullen making his debut this evening, as I said earlier. You wouldn't know it though, would you? He had a good run out of the old hairpin, as indeed did Will Blackwell Chambers, who's attacking... Oh, Jack Noller for 2nd is this. This is for 2nd place. What's happened to James Dennison? James Dennison, look, has dropped behind them in 4th position. So Matt Kendall suddenly finds himself with a very healthy lead. And this is now a 3-way fight for 2nd position. So something happened to James Dennison. I'm sure we'll be able to pick up the replay momentarily. But let's see what happens down into the Fogarty S's first, shall we? Because James will be very keen to get these positions back if he can. They should, if it's the same as race 1, squeeze one more lap in at the end of this, so he's got time to do this and get back on the podium. But positions lost, crucial points maybe in his quest for the championship have been lost, and he wants to try and get them back. Goes to the outside of Blackwell Chambers, they lean on each other slightly, but no harm, no foul, and Dennison loses maybe a car length or so as a result. So Nola to second, Blackwell Chambers to third, and James Dennison off the podium. Well, that is a bit of a turn up for the Bucks. Blackwell Chambers, meanwhile, goes to the inside of Nola, and I think breaks through into second position. This is what happens. So he'd lost ground already to the race leader. Heads towards Redgate. Has he picked up a slowdown? I think he's picked up a slowdown, hasn't he, at the chicane? Because, look, he's deliberately trying to lose that time into Redgate corner. If you're new to iRacing, a slowdown penalty is where if you cut a corner too badly for the iRacing god's liking, then you are told to slow down and lose a certain amount of time that it thinks you've gained, and you've got, I think it's 30 seconds usually in which to lose that time. Of course, drivers will always try and do that as gradually as possible rather than just hitting the brakes in a straight line, but James at one point there realised he had to do just that, and it cost him second place. But he's up the inside of Jack Nolan now, who has lost second position to Will Blackwell Chambers, for whom this race really has fallen into his lap. Dennison round the outside of McLean's corner. That's a tough place to be going into Coppets. There's wing mirror bashing between he and Jack Nolla. Can he hang it tough on the dirty side of the road and get the run down the exhibition straight? The answer, I'm afraid, is no. So Jack Nolla hangs on to third, and of course all of this battling is bringing Doble, Merritt and Pullen into play as well. So Matt Kendall is rather missing out on all the fun right now. He looks set for a victory. Blackwell Chambers, you would say, is pretty secure in second, but third on back could all change in the final few corners. There's a car. Oh, that's Merritt. That's Merritt with a slowdown. So Pullen is up a position. There goes Dennison to the inside of Nolla. They bang doors at the Melbourne hairpin, but James Dennison, I think, might just have scrabbled his way through. There's a flashing of the lights from Jack Nolla. He didn't appreciate that, but James Dennison has forced his way back into the podium places. But it's another win, a second in a row for Matt Kendall after a dramatic second race of the evening here at Donington Park. Will Blackwell Chambers third, and Nolla on the line is back ahead of Dennison. So Jack Nolla back into third. I don't know whether maybe James gave that place back, or maybe there were some fisticuffs on the apex, but Jack Nolla back into a podium position right on the line. The margin between the two of them was exactly 1/10 of a second, so next to nothing in it really. Doble, Merritt and Pullen actually ended up finishing in that order behind. I think I did spot Pullen for some reason giving the place back to Tom Merritt in all of that. Right, this was the final turn, so Dennison goes in ahead. Oh, misses his apex. No, it was a mistake. It was a mistake from James Dennison, and of course he's then on the dirty side of the road, and well, Jack Nolla just seemed to get through the gears better. Was it a mistake? Was Dennison trying to give the place back? He certainly seemed to slow pretty dramatically on corner exit. Scott Woodwiss's professional opinion is that he was giving it back as well, so maybe that was just a bit of a redress there for James Dennison, who maybe felt that he'd used a bit too much force in getting past Jack Nolla down at the Melbourne hairpin. Well, this has been some fantastic racing tonight and a brilliantly successful night for Matt Kendall, it's got to be said. 2 wins from 2, but Dennison did this last time at Navarra, won the first 2 races, and could then only manage 6th place in race 3. The reversed grid antics, let's call them, can very often turn the evening on its head. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in that third race. But yeah, Will Blackwell Chambers will be happy. He came through all of that brilliantly well with a 2nd place finish. Right, so 2 races down, 1 race to go. And as you'll be able to see on your screen right now, the Donington Park circuit is looking a little bit different. And yes, the weather really does change that quickly in the East Midlands. Indeed, across most of the United Kingdom, we had fairly dry conditions for the first 2 races, very dry conditions actually, and now a soaking wet track for race number 3. So, the cars now venture onto the circuit for a 5-minute warm-up session. This is standard procedure before race 3, by the way. The drivers being given a 5-minute warm-up just so that they can sort the grid out for race 3. But on this occasion, drivers I think will be very, very happy that they've been given another chance to sample the track, this time in very different conditions. And we can see here from the onboard camera, not sure who we're on board with here, but you can see just how much slower they have to take it. Those again who are on board with John Pethick, I'm hearing. So those of you, again, who perhaps aren't familiar with iRacing, Rain was a relatively recent addition to iRacing, coming about a year ago now. They introduced the Rain maybe just under a year, and it was a fairly seismic shift in the sim racing world, really, because iRacing for a long time regarded as the most accurate and lifelike form of sim racing out there. The one thing it didn't have was dynamic weather, and for years and years and years iRacing were teasing us about this, and finally delivered on it. And I have to say, most drivers that I speak to who have had experience of racing in the real world in the wet do seem to think that this is really very accurate, and that the immersion within the car in particular, when you've got a face full of spray, the standing water on the track, the standing water will be in a different place from one lap to the next as well, depending on where cars are running on the circuit. It really is the most advanced rain physics that I think we've ever had in sim racing, so iRacing have certainly made it worth the wait, but it does add an extra dimension of challenge, that is for sure. And some drivers, of course, as in real life, will excel in these conditions. They may be a top 10 driver at best in the dry, but as soon as it gets wet, all of a sudden, they're right up there. So we could really see a difference. Oops, in the order, John Pethick's dropped it through the crater curves. And he's not the only one. Look, there was two cars. He's going to be met by someone at high speed in the gravel trap. But John Pethick, oh yeah, he really isn't the only one getting that wrong. 86 with another in the gravel, as they're sort of throwing themselves off the edge of the track like lemmings. And yeah, drivers finding out just how treacherous these conditions are going to be. Now, in a couple of minutes, we're going to be going down through the crater curves again, except they're all going to be doing it together. And that is a recipe, I think, for resisting to say the urge to say the word disaster. I think a recipe for excitement, let's say, and certainly a fair amount of drama. It's these kind of races where championships really can be won or lost if you are a James Dennison or a Matt Kendall or a Will Blackwell-Chambers who have been scoring consistently in every race. Very easy to pick up a non-finish in conditions like these, and maybe through absolutely no fault of your own. So, oops, another moment there. That's number 11 with a big slide down the hill. Max Horler. Oh, and an even bigger slide now through the middle part of the craners. It's worth saying, actually, the crater curves on iRacing, and I have to be honest, it's the same in the dry, really. The crater curves are treacherous on cold tyres, and in the wet, even more so. As the cars hit that compression at the bottom, they have a real tendency to snap sideways, and that's in the dry, as I say. So in the wet, even more of a challenge. Now, one driver who should be pretty handy in the wet is Jamie Peters-Ennis, because I happen to know that he has experience driving a Fun Cup car in the wet at Alton Park. Not sure how many purple sectors he was setting at the time, but he has at least got some real-world racing or race car driving experience in the wet. And that is more than some other drivers on this grid can say. More than I can say, in fairness. I'm taking the mickey out of him, but I haven't had the opportunity to do that, in fairness. So Jamie will be drawing upon that experience from a rainy afternoon at Alton Park a couple of years ago, and hoping to pedal his Barney the Dinosaur liveried car to a stronger position, at least, than the first two races, where things, I think it's fair to say, haven't really gone particularly well for my long-time colleague. But looks pretty stable, actually, in the wet, doesn't he? That was certainly not the wildest sequence of corners we've seen from anyone in this warm-up session, which is now drawing to a close, so the drivers have learnt what they've learnt. For what it's worth, Nathan Williams set the fastest time in that session. It doesn't really, well, it really doesn't count for anything, and not many people, only 10 of them actually set a valid lap time in the end, but John Pethick seen go well in the real world in the wet in his MX-5, so maybe would be a factor. He'll be starting inside the top 10. That top 10, remember, has been reversed now, so whoever finished 10th in the previous race starts on pole, and guess who it was? It was John Pethick. So John Pethick starts from the front of the grid. Nathan Williams will be alongside him. Tom Griffiths and Luke Pullen, both handy drivers in the wet, particularly Pullen, it has to be said, starting on row 2. Tom Merritt and Isaac Doble on row 3, ahead of James Dennison and Jack Noller row 4. Then Will Blackwell-Chambers and Matt Kendall on the 5th row. Remember, Dennison starting a few places ahead of Kendall in this one because he lost that ground in race 2. Then it is Benji Douglas and Tom Monhemius completing the top dozen. Joe Moss and Lee Britton are next. Keep an eye on Lee. Ben Williams and Chris Etheridge row 8. Row 9, Pete Smith and Richard Jebb, with Neil Chisnell and Harry Barker completing the top 20. Then it's James Roberts and Mark Blunt. James Blunt, I nearly said. Keith Dalton and Carl Pilkington ahead of Dan Gamble and Paul Dunningham. Jonathan Berry, Bobby Holmes, Lewis Turkington, Anthony Lindley are next. Then it's Siobhan Beattie, Richard Bliss, Jamie Peters-Ennis, Daniel Crisp, Jacob Woods and Max Horler, all being well. So 2 races down, third race already underway, and John Pethick will lead the charge to Redgate Corner. Looks as though Nathan Williams slots into second position. That's Pullen, I think, coming to the outside, trying to squeeze across the nose of Tom Griffiths. Oh, into Redgate Corner, wide goes Pethick, through goes Williams. So Nathan Williams gets the lead away through the first corner. And if you're not the race leader, all you can see right now is a wall of water moving very rapidly down through the Craner curves. Right, hold your breath, everyone. Are they all going to get through? A big twitch from our onboard camera car as we drop through the old hairpin. But, dare I say it, so far, so good. That is the cleanest start to a race that we've had all night. So clearly this is the trick. Give them some rain to deal with, and all of a sudden the aggression goes down. Now we've got carnage. Oh, I had to go and speak, didn't I? Through Starkey's corner, multiple cars off in the background, and still they keep on coming. One of them is a Barney the Dinosaur car. I think that might have been Jamie Peters-Ennis, just about managing to dodge the worst of the carnage. But the other Barney the Dinosaur car has picked up quite a bit of damage in that one, so a lot of drivers dropping to the back of the field. Looks as though maybe Jonathan Berry and Mark Blunt are out already. Richard Bliss, Anthony Lindley, Max Horler involved, more cars off, and one going backwards up the hill towards Coppice Corner. And one, I think, in the background is Tom Merritt. That looked like Tom Merritt, the number 12 car, has dropped down the order, so that's significant if it was Tom, because he's been a front runner all season, actually, so far. No, it wasn't. He's in 5th position. I'm talking absolute nonsense. Forget I said anything. He's still in the top 5, but there was a similarly liveried car going off in the background of shot. Right, who do we have? Well, we have Nathan Williams and Luke Pullen at the front of the field. This is Neil Chisnell battling away with Lewis Turkington. And another car pointing the wrong way was Jake Woods, I think that was, rejoining in the number 84 car. From a rotation at the chicane, there is Jacob Woods, who has rejoined in about, well, probably 33rd place, I think, by the time James Roberts goes through. But it is Nathan Williams versus Luke Pullen at the front. Now, I hate to say I told you so, but I did say that Luke Pullen is pretty handy in the wet, and he sits in second position. He's gaining on a sideways Nathan Williams, who used all of the road and quite a bit of the standing water there. He's all over the place again, surely not going to get the car stopped for the old hairpin. Well, he does, but had to massively overslow the car. Nathan Williams has lost it from the lead and is stranded in the middle of the road at the old hairpin. Gets out of the way just before the next group of cars came through. John Bowen, Pullen's off as well. He looked Pullen sideways. Did he catch it? How did he save that? He's in the gravel, but will surely lose the lead. If he doesn't lose the lead, that is outrageous. He is side by side with John Pethick. They're still actually going to be side by side heading into Coppice Corner, and Tom Merritt thinks about making it 3 wide up the middle. I wouldn't advise that, Tom. Oh, Pethick overshoots the corner, leans on Pullen, who this time is around, and there is absolute calamity at the top of the hill. Merritt's on the grass. Pethick, I think, will come out of this with the race lead. He's flashing the lights. That nobody really, because there's no one in front of you, John. You're back in the front of the field. Who is in second? That's Isaac Doble, isn't it? Tom Griffiths is third, and here comes James Dennison. James Dennison to the inside of Tom Griffiths for third position through the chicane. Oh, and Griffiths is around. Tom Griffiths has gone in third position. It's going to be one of those races, isn't it, this, that where the driver who makes the fewest errors is going to come out with the race victory, I suspect. It is now about a 4th different leader of the lap, because Isaac Doble, I think, is up the inside of John Pethick now as they climb towards the Goddard's hairpin. But what a messy second lap of the race this has been. Isaac Doble not quite able to get through yet. Right, let's try and piece that all together. This is what was going on down at the bottom of the old hairpin. We're following Paul Dunningham. I'm going to imagine he's in the centre of all of this. Yep, there he goes. Actually not at the centre really, sort of goes through the gravel trap, and does that mean he then avoids the worst of the carnage on the exit? I think it probably does. There is the worst of the carnage on the exit, 65 getting sideways and heading back into the middle of the pack, which is never a good sign. This was Richard Jeff in the 65 car, so he got to the inside on the way into the old hairpin. And all good now. Oh, and actually that was someone moving across on him, I think, wasn't it? Coming off the corner, and then he's back into the road, and from this point it is four-wheeled ping-pong, I'm afraid, as he bounces from car to car. And unfortunately, his and many other drivers' races pretty much over in a flash. James Dennison's in the lead now. That's about our 5th leader in the last lap and a half or so. Dennison from Doble. Tom Merritt there was going for 3rd, but ran a bit too wide going through the right-hander up at McLean's corner. Kendall in behind, but let's see what happens between these two. Tom Merritt on the outside of John Pethick through Coppice corner. Pethick this time doesn't run wide into the car to his outside, and they will remain door handle to door handle down the straight. But I would say Isaac Doble is catching James Dennison at the front of the field. So as Tom Merritt tries to establish himself in 3rd and does successfully do so going into the Fogarty S's, the lead battle's starting to get closer as well. So Dennison leading, Doble 3/4 of a second or so behind him. Then Merritt, Pethick and Kendall still battling over 3rd as they drop into the Melbourne hairpin. Where's Will Blackwell Chambers? He's 7th, look, on the outside of Jack Noller at the back of that group. And this is how James Dennison got the lead. Dropping down through the Craner curves. You can't see him, but Isaac Doble is somewhere in front... sorry, John Pethick, I should say, is somewhere in front of us. Oh, what a move! What a move up the inside from James Dennison. Real confidence in the wet. And John Pethick, I think, did the right thing, really, there, in stepping to one side and getting out of the way, because James Dennison was coming through whether John wanted him to or not. So, Dennison, Doble, Merritt, Pethick, Kendall, the top 5 for now, and I emphasise for now because I don't think that's going to stay the same for long. Then it is Will Blackwell Chambers and Jack Noller. Monhemius doing well in 8th position ahead of Lee Britton and Joe Moss. It is Joe Moss in the Flat Cap Motorsport car completing the top 10. But this is the best we've seen from Tom Monhemius in this evening's races. Look how close it is at the front of the field. Before it all kicks off again, let's take another look back at something that happened this time to Richard Bliss in the sort of, again, one of those early 90s BMW liveries. Oh, there's a car in the gravel to our left, so in order to avoid that car, Richard sends the car into a spin. I know he didn't do that intentionally, but he then ended up getting collected by another car in the middle of the road, and down the order he would tumble. Another replay now. There's lots of these to get through. Jacob Woods here. Now this was, I think, the car that maybe got into the car we just saw spinning. Yes, it was. Look, he had nowhere to go. He was side by side with another car, and Jacob Woods, I'm afraid, clatters into the side of it, bounces into the air, and rejoins the circuit. There's positional changes here. Joe Moss and Tom Griffiths. I think Tom Griffiths into the top 10. John Pethick is under threat from Tom Merritt. So Pethick not really now showing the sort of speed that he was right at the very start of the race when he led briefly, but still hanging on to a podium place for the time being. Fastest lap, by the way, belongs to Luke Pullen. Remember him, he was leading earlier on. Changed for 4th, meanwhile, as Matt Kendall muscles up the inside of Tom Merritt. But that was an important pass for Kendall because, of course, Matt has been our top scorer of the evening so far with those 2 race victories and wants to try and make it a hat-trick, which no one's been able to do, of course, so far this season. Yes, it is only the 2nd event of the season, but Matt would love to have that early accolade to his name. James Dennison now steals that fastest lap back, by the way. So James Dennison, race leader, pulling away now, 2.3 seconds. In fact, by the time I finish that sentence, 2.4 seconds nearly ahead of Isaac Doble in 2nd place. But Isaac is distancing himself from this fight for 3rd. They're all twitching around as they drop down into the old hairpin. But there, James Dennison, well, making amends, he will feel, for the slight disappointment there in race number 2. It wasn't a disastrous result, 4th position, but he knows it could have and should have been a lot better than that. But a couple of mistakes towards the end of the race meant that he did not finish where he really ought to have done. James seems to be in a nice rhythm now in this 3rd race. And pulling away out in front. Pethick still defending well, it has to be said, in 3rd place, but can he fend off Matt Kendall? The championship leader, of course, after those first 2 races of the evening. Matt Kendall will want to try and pick up 3rd position if possible. He sort of hunts around to the inside into the Fogarty S's. Again, not trying to make a pass, certainly not in these conditions, but just trying to force John Pethick to outbrake himself slightly, drift a bit wide of the apex, slow himself down on the exit. It's actually Kendall, though, who got the slightly poorer exit. He's late on the brakes, though, but not as late as Tom Merritt, who almost clatters into the back of him. Pethick runs wide, and out of all of that, I'm not entirely sure how, but actually, there is a chance that Matt Kendall is about to take 3rd place. He's on the outside line into the Goddard's hairpin. Didn't want to risk it out there, did he? So, drops back in line. And as they turn through that final turn, they slither and slide their way out of the final corner. And splash their way back across the timing line. Disappointingly, there are only 5 minutes and 20 seconds left in this third race, so let's check in on some of the battles going on further back. Daniel Crisp here trying to gain ground. Well, in fact, he did just gain ground against Carl Pilkington, who has gone off behind. But Daniel Crisp, in the Kraken liveried car, is just outside the top 20 at the moment, 22nd position. And keen to try and get a... Sorry, 21st position, I should say. Keen to try and get a place back. That is Keith Dalton off the road. A long way off the road at Goddard's. Bounces his way back on. Did he jump or was he pushed? Well, there's a car coming through shot with no front end attached to it, so I suspect maybe he was pushed. That's one of the Barney the Dinosaur cars. In fact, they've got themselves together, haven't they, those two, I think. Jamie Peters Ennis inside the top 20, doing well in this race. Ben Williams, meanwhile, is chasing down Lewis Turkington, son of multiple British touring car champion Colin Turkington, and brother, I believe, of former TCR UK champion as well. Lewis Turkington, that's Luke Pullen, meanwhile, pulling off to the side of the road, I'm afraid, and retiring from the race. So Luke Pullen, I don't know whether he's been off again, maybe, or just the damage was a bit too much to continue. Off he goes as here. Oh no, that's Lee Britton and Tom Griffiths. They've tangled going into the Fogarty S's, and two drivers who have shared the racetrack several times in the past in real life do so again in the sim, and that was Lee Britton's teammate Benji Douglas very nearly joining the scene backwards as well. Not a good sequence of corners there for the teammates there. Sim 1 liveried cars. This was what happened to Benji, so he's got, again, a face full of spray, can't really see where he's going, pulls to the outside for a clearer view. Does he get on the white line? Yeah, touch the white line going in. You don't want to be doing that in the wet. In fairness, that was a very, very good bit of car control. I know these cars do have traction control enabled, to some extent anyway, but that wasn't all traction control. There was a lot of skill involved in him bringing that one back around. So very entertaining stuff. And he would have picked a slowdown penalty up, but I doubt in the wet it's been all that hard to get rid of. Now, Lee Britton, after that tangle with Tom Griffiths, is now going to be a man on a charge. He goes around the outside of Harry Barker there through Redgate Corner. Bit of damage now, unfortunately, to the front of Lee Britton's car. But yes, he and Tom Griffiths have debated many a podium place and even race victory in the Mazda MX-5 Super Cup run by the BRSCC. Unfortunately, they're on-track battling in the sim racing world. Got a little bit too close for comfort there. Britton coming off the worst because Griffiths is still in the top 10, with Lee Britton having a bit of work to do. In fact, Tom Griffiths has just gone past Pete Smith, who is dropping down the order, so Pete Smith's been off the road, I think. Meanwhile, this is what it's like to be Will Blackwell Chambers. He is stuck behind Tom Merritt and John Pethick. Matt Kendall into third position. I forget now whether we saw that move, but Matt Kendall into a podium place, and Blackwell Chambers actually now under threat from Jack Noller, who is to his inside. Ooh, and they lean on each other slightly. Jack Noller goes through, and Will Blackwell Chambers, a bit like in race one really, just starting this sort of slow, inexorable slide down the order. Trying to do something about it now. That goes to the outside of Noller, who is to the inside of Merritt, look. So Jack Noller, the best form of defence was attack, he thought. And having seen the attack coming from Will Blackwell Chambers, thought he would mount one of his own against the Fiesta Junior racer, Tom Merritt. He is on the outside line. Tom holds on the way in. Noller actually managed to sell the dummy there, got back to the inside line, but that's where all the standing water is. And that's why his car was fishtailing around coming off the turn. So Noller settles back in line behind. It is Will Blackwell Chambers and then Tom Monhemius behind him. So Tom Monhemius, is one of those drivers clearly that I alluded to earlier on, is a bit of a demon in the wet, because Tom was in and around the fringes of the top 10, I think, in the dry, but in the wet conditions is a real factor here for a strong result. Could yet break into the top 5 depending on what happens ahead of him. What is happening ahead of him is that Tom Merritt is now John Pethick is now coming under renewed attack from Tom Merritt, who gets a better exit from the old hairpin. Tries to draw level with the blue machine, but John Pethick has driven a very strong defensive race. We haven't seen him make too many mistakes. When he has, he's generally been able to bounce back from them, and he's positioning the car really well there. Look, on the inside into McLean's, and then parks it on the apex, immediately dives for the inside again, heading up into Coppice Corner. And Tom Merritt forced to go the long way round, which you would think would be the grippier side of the road in the wet, but he can't quite make it work. Oh no! Oh, into the back of John Pethick, who exits stage right behind the exhibition centre, and he did not deserve that, John Pethick. He was driving a really good race, and just a tiny, tiny miscalculation there from Tom Merritt has sent him off the road. This was Pethick's rear view, so he defends going in. Merritt tries to get, I think, a switchback here, but just times it wrong. Gives him a tap up the rear, and that sends Pethick spinning. Merritt, in fairness, lost some ground as well. He's dropped behind Jack Noller and Will Blackwell Chambers, so actually lost a place out of all of that rather than gaining one. But that will be a very little comfort, I'm afraid, to John Pethick, who finds himself all the way down in 8th position. That is not the result that he probably deserved to have, really, but John Pethick has proven that he is quick in these conditions. The checkered flag, by the way, missed by me completely, has been waved for James Dennison. So James Dennison gets back to winning ways here at Donington Park, his 3rd win of the season. We were so engrossed in what was going on behind, we completely forgot about the checkered flag coming out. So Dennison the winner, Isaac Doble 7 seconds behind. Possibly the biggest winning margin of the season so far, I would say. Matt Kendall 3rd, Jack Noller in 4th, and Will Blackwell Chambers came home in 5th. Then it was Merritt, Monhemius, Pethick, Griffiths and Joe Moss, and this is a battle going on further back. Nathan Williams and Ben Williams doing battle, and Ben will get the better of Nathan there in a scrap for 15th position. Keith Dalton is next, a long way back. And then James Roberts. So Keith Dalton only now turning in to the Melbourne hairpin, some 35.5 seconds behind the top 16. So I think the top 16 are probably those that haven't had any major issues. Everybody else has had at least one drama, it would seem, in this race. There is a battle yet to be resolved, and it's this one, actually. Jamie Peters-Ennis being caught, oh dear, and now assaulted, rather, by Dan Gamble. Oh no, Jamie just avoided the Kraken, and that could have ended a lot worse, couldn't it? I think actually maybe, yes, I think Dan Gamble is slowing down to give the place back to Jamie Peters-Ennis. But of course, that's all allowed Daniel Crisp to go through in the Kraken machine. So Daniel, pretty happy with that. 2 freebies on the final lap. Jamie Peters-Ennis, what's left of his car, is now picking its way through the final corner. And fair play there to Dan Gamble. That was good gentlemanly racing, wasn't it? Having quite clearly been the reason that Jamie found himself grass tracking on this latest occasion anyway. Dan did the right thing there, really, and let him back through. That's Paul Dunningham coming through in 22nd place. Still, we're waiting for them to all come through. There's a very damaged car here, number 33 of Siobhan Beattie. The right front corner of that car does not look all that healthy. And the rest of it won't in a second, because Siobhan's celebration is to pitch the car backwards into the concrete wall on the right-hand side of the road. Still more to come. Lewis Turkington's not had the best of luck this evening. Looked quick at times, actually, did Lewis, but hasn't quite managed to piece together a really good result. Mainly, really, due to being involved in other people's incidents, it seemed. Hopefully we'll see more from him next time, when the BRSCC Winter eSports Series will head to the famous Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit. So, tremendous night of racing here at Donington Park. Mixed conditions, mixed results as well, and a bit of a mix-up in the championship standings, mainly because of a couple of incidents and issues for some of our title contenders. But it was James Dennison who came out on top in race 3, ahead of Isaac Doble and Matt Kendall. Jack Noller and Will Blackwell Chambers completed the top 5. Then it was Tom Merritt and Tom Monhemius 6th and 7th. John Pethick was 8th, ahead of Tom Griffiths and Joe Moss to complete the top 10. Lee Britton, one of the drivers of the evening, I would say, breaking into 11th place. Ari Barker was 12th, ahead of Benji Douglas, Pete Smith, Ben Williams, Nathan Williams after their fantastic side-by-side battle to the line. James Roberts inside the top 20, good to see. I think he was nearly a lap down, but 17th place nonetheless. Daniel Crisp came home in 18th, 19th position. Was Dan Gamble and Keith Dalton in 20th, ahead of Paul Dunningham, Siobhan Beattie and Jamie Peters-Ennis. And then we get into those who really had issues. These were a lap down. Lewis Turkington, Mark Blunt, Neil Chisnell, Bobby Holmes and Anthony Lindley. I think we're all running at the flag at least, albeit a lap behind the leader. There were a handful of retirements though behind them, who sadly weren't able to make it home. And they included, I think, Chris Etheridge was a lap down. Richard Bliss and Luke Pullen, I don't think, made it to the end. Carl Pilkington, Max Hall and Richard Jebb, Jacob Woods and Jonathan Berry all failing to finish. But they, I'm sure, had some fun. Hopefully learned a fair amount from the races this evening as well. And we may just have a chance in a moment or two to catch up with some of our star drivers, and indeed we do get a chance to catch up with one of them now. Will Blackwell Chambers hops into the commentary box. Will, thank you for joining us. That was an entertaining night, wasn't it? You were in the thick of the battles, particularly in race 3, but ultimately I think a night of slightly mixed results, would you say?
To be honest, with the skill level that's in this series at the moment, I'm just happy to be near the front. The competition is unreal. The car is certainly hard work. And yeah, really quite happy with the evening, to be honest. We had a Clapham North 1-2 in race 2, so certainly no complaints there. So no, really good evening. Mixed. Everyone at the front's really clean. It's really nice to see the driving standards at the moment. It looked pretty good at the front. I'm sure I'll have to look at some things throughout the field, but we'll see where we get to.
Yeah, there were some interesting things going on behind you, but in conditions like race 3, I think I'm right in saying that's the first wet race we've had this season. It's challenging, isn't it? Especially when you're stuck in the pack. You had experiences in that race where you were in traffic, and not only can you not see where you're going, but that standing water can creep up on you easily.
Yeah, so I'll admit it's the first time the BRSCC eSports series has been using the new Tempest weather system that iRacing's brought in. We're still learning it. I will openly admit, as the series organizer, that was not how wet we intended it to be. That's what iRacing likes to call light rain. I think most people would call that near red flag conditions. So yeah, we're gonna take let's be honest, the mistake made in this race, and we will be adjusting going forward. We're not having many wet races in this season. It's just this round in Silverstone. But yeah, we do recognise that it's possibly a little bit too damp there.
Will, you are talking to a northerner. That was just a light drizzle, as far as I'm concerned. I really don't think that was too bad. But yes, maybe an idea to tweak it, because we are dealing with a lot of people, aren't we, in this series, Will, who don't necessarily have a huge amount of sim racing experience. You, I'm sure, have interacted with a lot of them as in your role as series organizer. How are the less experienced members of the grid finding it?
I think the wet may have been a slight step too far. But no, it's really good to see, because what you've got a lot in the Discord that we're using to manage this is you've got more experienced drivers helping newer drivers learn iRacing, get up to speed. We've got guides in place, and basically everyone's there helping each other. It's a really, really nice community that we're cultivating here. And who knows? Hopefully, it might lead to opportunities IRL as well.
Excellent stuff. Will, thank you for having a chat. Well done on some solid results this evening. We'll see you next week at Brands Hatch.
Cheers. I'll invite someone in, shall I?
Good idea, Will. We've got a few drivers waiting, I think, to have a chat with us. And Jack Noller, I can see, is waiting to speak to us. Jack, we saw in the thick of some of the battles, and is usually good for a chat. So we'll see. Yes, here he is. Jack Noller joins us in the box. Jack, welcome to the commentary box. That was a lively evening, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, and it's good to be back into the series after missing round 1. But it was, I think, the strongest pace I've had over the last 3 years, given in iRacing. I thought I'd put some time into it this time, and it's paid off with 2 podiums and a spin to 4th place in the last race. So that was, when I was backwards on that point, I was thinking, but luckily I managed to save it and then climb my way back through. And yeah, it was. There was obviously some chaos going on, as you do in that sort of range of iRacing lobbies, but I think we had some pretty good racing all in all, and I think I lacked some consistency. But yeah, I hope everyone had a decent showing. I think there was a few times where it was a bit processional here and there, but I'm sure there was action somewhere up and down the field.
There certainly was. That I can guarantee you. Some really good battles going on further back. But in this car, a lot of the battles seem to be triggered by a driver making a mistake. I've done a few laps in these cars myself, not as many as you will have done, I'm sure. Is it a car that can sort of catch out the unwitting driver quite quickly?
Yeah, especially with how you drive iRacing, I think you can't trail brake really at all, or if you have to, it's a tiny bit. Like, you have to do all the braking before turning in, and if you push that braking point by a tiny bit, especially at Old Hairpin where the car is fully loaded up on that left front, it means you just push wide and you have to grab the lower gear, and then you're slow on the way out. I also am not the greatest at saving my front tyres. That's something I need to learn. Partway through the race 2, Matt said, "Oh, you're meant to try and keep front left below a certain pressure." And I looked down at the gauge. I was like, "I'm well over that." So there's. And then Will said that's why he got past me at the end of race 2. It's just I didn't manage my tyres as well. So there's some learning to do there. So yeah, that's where the overtakes come from. It's very easy to overdrive the car on the way in, and activate the TVC.
Well, not too many mistakes from you, at least. That's nice to see, Jack. Some more consistent results, and yeah, hopefully more of the same from you at Brands Hatch in a week's time. But Jack, thanks for having a chat, and best of luck for the rest of the season.
Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed.
I certainly did. It was an eventful night, that is for sure. So Jack Noller, who is going to be a factor in the championship, I think, certainly if he can build up a little bit of that consistency he was just talking about. 4th place in the final race, but was a podium contender in all 3 of them this evening at Donington Park. Right, do we have time, I wonder, to speak to one more driver? Yes, I believe we do. So, well, we've got a difficult choice to make here. We've got James Dennison or Matt Kendall, both of whom are waiting. I think since Matt Kendall was the highest point scorer of the night, probably a good idea to speak to our new championship leader. Matt joins us in the box now, and as I was just saying, Matt, I believe, math's never been my strongest subject, but I think you're the championship leader after what was a really consistently high-scoring night. Well done.
Yeah, thank you. Maths hasn't been my strong point either, so I think that's how it works out.
Oh, well, certainly if you keep winning races like that, I think that's going to do you well in the long run. Was Donington a track that you were always pretty confident you were going to be competitive at?
I was confident initially at the start of the week, and then I saw the times the others were turning in, and I had my doubts. But I was pretty happy to discover that I actually had a bit more in the tank than I thought, so that was nice to find.
And then, of course, just as you're settling in and you've got yourself 2 race wins, and you're starting to think, hang on, this is feeling quite good. Then along comes the rain. How did you find that 3rd race from your perspective?
There was a bit more rubber on the track than I think we anticipated going in. So turn 1 out the pits on the warm-up told me that it was going to be trouble. So I don't think I went full throttle for the whole first lap. Just trying not to die, so I was happy to survive.
Well, survive you did, and as I say, it's been a tremendous evening, really, as far as the points are concerned. Moving on now, though, to Brands Hatch, very different kind of track. We were hearing from Will there's no rain, no wet weather planned for Brands, so what's the process now going into the next round? You're obviously going to be a championship contender. You're going to be taking this relatively seriously, I'd imagine. How much practice? What does that practice look like? And how do you think your fortunes will fare at Brands Hatch in a few weeks?
Probably the most work is going to be getting the car to rotate through the faster stuff at Brands. This thing, it's not too bad at slow speed. It's not too bad medium speed, but when you're trying to pitch it in at high speed, it doesn't want to go. So it's going to be braking drills and hoping to not screw it up on the night.
Well, I think based on what we've seen tonight, there's very little chance of you doing that, Matt. I'm sure you're going to be a factor again at Brands Hatch. Thanks for having a chat with us here. Really well done on the results this evening, and best of luck for the next round.
Thanks very much.
So, Matt Kendall, the Clapham North driver, with, as I said, some really, really good results this evening here at Donington Park, and I believe the championship lead will be his heading to Brands Hatch. Right. I think that might be all we'll have time for. Do we have time for a quick chat with James Dennison? No, I don't think we do. So we will instead look ahead to the 3rd round, I should say, not the final round. We've still got 3 more weeks to go. We head from Donington Park this time to Brands Hatch in our 3rd event of the season, then to Cadwell Park, recently added to iRacing, of course, Cadwell Park, and it all finishes on the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit, a little bit further south in the Midlands of the UK. But it's been a fantastic night of racing here at Donington Park. Big thank you to all of the drivers who have put on a show for us, all of you tuning in at home and enjoying that show. We will be back, well, I won't be, but Scott Woodwis will be, to talk you through all of the action next time at Brands Hatch.
Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.